Alright, so let's talk about the pagination here. So how we can implement the pagination in Laravel. So we have a bunch of options available in the Laravel. Basically, these are all different methods in order to implement the pagination. So we will start off by simple pagination, and then we will learn two more paginations, but there are a lot of others, and I will request you to please read the documentation in order to learn more about the paginations. So we have in our previous lectures when we were seeding the database, so we seeded the posts, and here you can see that we have now a tons of posts and a lot of posts basically displaying on a page. And obviously if I just reload the page, so this takes a lot of time to reload or open the page. So let me just show you. If I now reload it, and you can see that it is basically it reloaded for like 1 or 2 seconds. The other reason is basically is that the sum of the data is already been cached, but on the servers when the traffic is really huge, without implementing the post or pagination, so your data or your servers might choke. So the first thing is basically that we need to do here. So in our posts controller, so here we are basically getting the latest post by using the latest and a get method. So instead of get method, let's use the paginate here. So this paginate is basically will going to paginate the database records. All right. So let's say we want to paginate it by 20 records per page. Now, if I reload the page, and boom, now you can see that the pagination is implemented, and it's really easy and really simple. So you can see that now we have only 20 records showing per page. So if I just lower it down to, let's say, 5 records per page, and again you will see that I am now only getting 5 records. Okay, the other thing is basically how we can display the pagination numbers down here. So there are a couple of things that you need to aware of before you actually try to implement the pagination buttons here. The first thing is basically the Laravel pagination that comes is basically by default they uses the Tailwind CSS. So if you are using the Tailwind CSS in your application, then obviously that will work really nice, and the output of that pagination is really amazing. So the UI is really beautiful, and you will love that the paginations. Apart from that, the Laravel also supports Bootstrap as well. So it supports Bootstrap 5, Bootstrap 4, and lot of other CSS utilities as well. So in this learning session, we are not implementing any sort of UI library. So if I now try to go and try to display the pages here, or the pagination links here, the links will does reflect on the page, but the UI will be distorted. So first let's see how we can basically use or implement the pagination and display the pages. So inside the index method here, in after the for each, we only need to basically what do is basically we need to say posts and just use links like so. Now if I reload the page, and now you can see that we have basically the previous record, next record, and the record as well. So if I now go down here, you can see that this is basically what I was talking about. The CSS or the HTML is really distorted one, obviously, because I am not using the Tailwind CSS. So this is basically by default coming as a Tailwind CSS, but it also does show me like how many records I have. So it is showing like showing 1 to 5 of 1019 records. I also have next and previous pages, and down up here in the URL you will see that the page number is being reflected. Click on that. Now the page is third one, and if I go to previous one, and there you go, you can see that now the button is automatically previously disabled and the next is enabled. Now this is the first example. Now the other example that I'm going to show you is basically uh, let's say you don't want to show the number of pages here. Obviously you can just navigate the pages by clicking on those icons as well. Sorry, these pages numbers. Let's say you don't want to show this pagination number and just want to show the previous and next buttons. So in that case, what I'm going to do is basically I'm going to use this simple paginate. So this simple paginate method will basically, now you can see that we have nothing down here except previous and next buttons. So now if I click on that, I am now navigating to the next pages or the next records. And now if I click on previous, so it does work the same as well. Okay, the last thing is, so these are basically the two methods that comes with Laravel pagination, and there is another method which is called the cursor pagination. So cursor, let me just implement it. So cursor pagination. Now if I reload the page, you can now see that this previous button is disabled and the next button is enabled. Now take a moment here and see that our current implementation is basically, this is showing the page and the page number. So right now what is happening is basically the Laravel is implementing the offset method on our database records. All right, so this offset means like select static from post table. um, Offset is basically the 10 and the limit is basically 10. So this 10 will be basically like the 10th offset from the record, and then this will move on to the further 10 records. All right, so this is basically how this is implementing. Now in terms of cursor pagination, now if I click on next, you will see that this is basically now totally changed. So we now have cursor here and then we have an encrypted string here. So what is the difference between the other pagination methods and this cursor pagination? So the cursor pagination is basically far more optimized as compared to other pagination methods. It also does not comes with page numbers, where apart from that which we have seen previously, but it does come with the cursor option here. Now what this cursor is basically doing, it is basically um, keeping track of our previous record and making sure that the next record is basically greater than our previous record. So for an instance, let's say um, the main column it is pointing to is called the ID here. All right, so out of the box by default we haven't specified any column here. We can specify the columns as well, but this will automatically look for the primary key, which is basically the ID. You can also specify other columns as well, but make sure that if you are going to specify the other columns, so let me just go down to the cursor pagination here. So if you go down, if you want to implement the other columns, so you need to make sure that the other columns are indexed. All right, so the indexing is applied on that. So here you can see that the example which is currently here, so this is basically the offset pagination that we implemented previously. So what it does is basically this is taking the limit and the offset, whereas the cursor pagination is basically keeping record of our previous iteration. And then let's say we have implemented the 10 record per page. So this will say like, okay, the ID should be greater than 10 and the limit should be 10. And then when this does goes to the 10, so the next ID would be the 20. So it will track from the 20 greater than 20 until like the next 10 records. So now you can, down below you can see that uh, there are certain limitations with the cursor pagination, but obviously there are some pros as well. So here you can see that this is really important when we are implementing the large data sets. So this works like the performance is really better. And then you can also see that this basically write less queries as compared to the other one. So the drawbacks or limitations is that basically with the cursor pagination, so this is kind of similar to the simple pagination. So with cursor pagination, we cannot see the number of pages that we have apart from just next and previous buttons. So similarly, we are seeing the next and previous buttons here. All right, so there are some other things as well. which you obviously I would recommend you to please read the documentation here. Now, so these are the three most popular or more commonly used pagination methods, and I prefer that if your web application is quite large and you want to make sure that the results are really optimized and they are displaying instantly on the web pages, so I would recommend using by cursor pagination. The one thing is basically it is really optimized. The other thing is that it doesn't exposes the page, right? So this does not expose like on what page we are currently standing here. Obviously, if your application is not that much high and it is like a medium level application, you can implement the other methods, which is basically the paginate and the simple paginate method. All right, so that's about it, and I will see you in the next one.